Welcome to the Dom Sub Devotion podcast. Every episode of Dom Sub Devotion is an authentic reflection of our real life in a loving 24/7 DS marriage. If you crave the passion and intensity of a power exchange dynamic inside of a deeply loving and intimate relationship, you've found the right place. You can always find more from us in the show notes and at infinitedevotion.com. Thank you for listening.
Hello everyone, welcome to Dom Sub Devotion. This episode is a question and answer episode, and it's one that I recorded specifically with questions from my submissive listeners and viewers, because a theme that has been very consistent over the past several years of doing this work is the theme of women feeling and experiencing a sense of heartbreak. Women who are navigating the tension between their craving for submission and the pain of not having that need met. So if you are a man, if you're a man who is or aspires to be a dominant, I want you to listen to this episode. I recorded this not just to answer the questions that the submissives brought to me. I record this also for you as the dominant, as the man who is looking to or trying to lead a woman inside of a loving container. You need to hear and feel the heartbreak, the fear, the pain that women are in for the lack of having a solid embodied partner in their lives. So not all these questions are heavy. Some of them are fun. Some of them are lighter. But I want you to listen to the general theme of these questions, because when I started reading them, it was such a consistent theme. So as I get deeper into this episode, pay attention not just to the questions being asked, but to the heart behind the questions. I'm going to start out with a couple of somewhat lighter ones, and we'll work into the heavier stuff. But a couple of these first ones are extremely common questions that I've gotten so many times. If you've listened to the podcast for a while, you've heard me answer these questions before. I'm going to answer them again, and I'm going to answer them based on the best connection to the truth that I can give you. The first one is actually two that are pretty similar here. Was, how do you handle this lifestyle with a family and kids? And the second one was, how do you live out the kinky part of the dynamic more if you live with family or if you have kids? So there's a couple sides to this. The dynamic, the non-kinky, the non-sexual part of the dynamic. You can live this out throughout your daily life. Something I've said a lot of times over the years is that your life is the dynamic and the dynamic is life. You do this by integrating the ways that you live the leader-follower dynamic into your day-to-day life. It's a part of how you eat. It's a part of how you go through your morning and evening routines. It's a part of how the structure of your household is run. You can live this dynamic as a part of your family life without letting people in on parts of your life that they don't need to see. But you can know, because of the conversations you've had, because of the negotiations, because of the structure that you've created together, that, for example, the way you go about brushing your teeth, like, you can make a ritual out of toothbrushing, where that is a part of your dynamic. You can do these things right under people's noses, and they don't have to know that you have rituals around eating, that you have rituals around the way you put your shoes on, that you have rules and structure built into and baked into your day-to-day life. You can live this dynamic right under people's noses, and they don't need to have any idea. It's the meaning that it has between you and your dominant that really matters. So you can do this with kids. You can do this with family. If you are older, but you still live with your family, I have a couple of clients who are in their 20s and they're moving back in with parents. You can do this right under their noses. They don't have any idea. That's okay. It's really not a hard line to walk when you integrate the dynamic into your life rather than having it be all based in kink. But for the most part, what you assume people are going to know, they don't know. It's how you feel about it that really gives away what it is. So integrate it into the daily parts of life and it's very easy. But then the second question, how do you live out the kinky part of the dynamic more if you live with family or if you have kids? Well, that's where you have to be, you have to be realistic with your life. If you have children, you have children. So rather than try to figure out how to make life different than it is, you work with life as it is. And maybe that means nap times. When the kids take naps, you make that a part of the time that you play in kink. When they go to school, after they go to bed, in the morning before they get up. And also, this is a message for dominants, but also submissives, speak up for this. Date each other, right? Just because you're in a dominant submissive, even if it's a very kinky, very heavy protocol, high protocol kind of a dynamic, doesn't mean that you stop dating each other. Dawn and I have been married for a long time. We've been married since 2011, and we still go out on dates every week, usually. Sometimes a couple times a week. Sometimes it's fancier. Sometimes it's just taking her out for a drive in to see pretty scenery. Last night we had an excellent bottle of wine and a wonderful dinner at a beautiful restaurant. So it doesn't have to all be expensive, but get out of your house. Hire a babysitter. Or if you don't have money to hire a babysitter, find another couple where you can take turns. Get hotel rooms. Get creative. You just have to think outside of the box of everything has to happen in our house. There were years before Dawn and I were in a dom-sub dynamic where I would get hotel rooms. We would go out for a dinner, and then we would go to a hotel room just to have a place to play, just to have a place to be sexual, be kinky, be fun together, because there was something that happened with her being a mom when I got her outside of the house. She came more alive. She was more free. She felt just, there was a completely different dynamic between us when we got out of the house. So you've got to get out of the house, and then in that time when you're out of the house, make that a part of when you as the dominant steps into the leadership role, right? You plan it. You make the arrangements, or you delegate to her about what arrangements to make. But take the lead in the way that the whole thing goes. So if you have factors around your home life that keep you from being able to be as kinky as you want to be at home, get out of the house. Go somewhere else. Get a hotel room. Go to a park where you can kind of be by yourselves and you can talk to each other the way you want to talk to each other without having to whisper. Just think outside the box and find a way to make it work. Next question, someone said, we'd love to take the Rapture course. When will it be offered again? I appreciate this question, and I normally don't make these Q&As into commercials, but I wanted to bring this up because we just finished our third round of Rapture. Because Dawn isn't in the customer-facing side of this business anymore, the last thing that she did was help me record all of the Rapture content. So we have it as a pre-recorded self-study course that's going to be made available. And then we are also going to find a way to integrate some Q&A into that. So stay tuned if you're interested in Rapture. It's going to be different than we've done it in the past, but all the content is going to be the same. So stay tuned. Make sure you're on our email list. I'll be sharing more about that relatively soon. Next question. How can a woman in a dominant career transition to the submissive wife at home? She says, I have to find ways to transition because I manage everything at work. And there are a lot of women in this position. So the first thing that I ask any woman who's in this position is, why did you choose that job in the first place? If you really want to be in a submissive role, if you want to live in a feminine role in your life, there's a chance that something's going to have to break. Something is probably going to have to break. Now, I'm not saying you can't keep the same job, but I'm saying if you aren't willing to question it, then to a certain extent, you can't have it both ways. You really have to understand the difference between what it means to be living in your submission and what it means to be living in that dominant role in your career. If you want to be switching those energies back and forth, which, like I said, is going to get hard. It's going to get harder because the more you go in one direction in your home life, especially if that feels good and nourishing to you, it's going to get harder and harder to keep pushing yourself back into the opposite. But you have to understand that the difference, and I'm going to be getting more into this in other questions that are coming up here, the main difference is that in a submissive feminine role, you start in a receptive posture. In a dominant masculine role, you start with a giving posture. So you're doing first. In a submissive posture, you are receiving first. So the transition really has to be one of settling down. It has to be one of calming your nervous system to a point where you can receive again. Where you receive first before you give. I recommend having some kind of a ritual built around this. So if you're a couple and the woman, the submissive, is going out into the world doing dominant career-based things, then when she comes back home, have some sort of a ritual that might involve relaxation, it might involve kneeling, it might involve pleasure. You have to know what works for you, but to get her back into that receptive mode. Because until the do energy is calmed down, there is no submission. So you need to have some way, ideally built into, again, bake it into your life. Like I said in a question earlier, bake this into a part of the way that you live your life, that you come home and you engage in some sort of a ritual directed by your dominant that transitions you back into a feminine receptive first mode. Next question here. Someone who's clearly listened to some of our older podcasts said once, Dawn mentioned that she has said some pretty edgy things to Andrew when expressing her truth freely. Are any of these things shareable? They are shareable, but for the sake of answering this question and the fact that this isn't, at least not yet, a space where I'm just going to be a kink dispenser so everybody gets to know what all of Dawn's kinks are, because I know you'd all love to know it. But the deeper thing behind this is when Dawn brings edgy things to me, my objective is to always receive her, to not judge her, to not shame her, to not react and make it about myself. And the only way that I can have a chance to do that is if she actually brings it to me. So it doesn't matter what the edgy things are. The deeper point here is she has to bring them, even when it's uncomfortable for her. And I have to do my best to receive them. Now, I've gotten really good at this, frankly, because I love being able to know what is going on inside of her. I love knowing what her turn-ons are, what her kinks are, what excites her, what she's afraid of. I want to know, I want her to let me in that way. Until I did the work inside of myself to not be afraid of what it meant about me or about our relationship, afraid that I was going to lose her, afraid that, whatever. When I'm acting or living in a fear-based posture, then her edgy stuff, her edgy truths feel like threats to me. And that's my job in my own growth, is to become strong enough that I can receive all of that without being reactive to it. Our next question says, my husband compares me to online submissives, which makes me feel really unsafe with him and not want to submit to him at all. Should I just let him find his own side submissive? The second part of that question is really a moot point, because if he wants his own side submissive, then like that, I don't even know what to say to that part. Because the reality is, if he's comparing you to online submissives and comparing you to other people, and you're feeling unsafe with him and you don't want to submit to him, then you don't even have an honest relationship. Like, what I don't know in this question is, are you sharing with him that this makes you feel really unsafe? That if what he wants is for you to, if your submission to look different, then that starts with accepting you where you are. Guys, if you're listening to this, listen and hear this clearly. You will not force her to be your fantasy version of a submissive in any way that feels authentic. You can't force that. Now, you can desire it, you can want it, but you can't command someone to be ready for something that they're not ready for. You have to lead them there. You have to lead her there, which starts with creating enough trust that she feels enough trust. Not just that you demand trust, but that she feels trust. That's where it starts, so that you can say, okay, now like this. A woman's submission will never feel real to you unless she is submitting to you based on the life that you're living, based on the man that you are, based on earned respect. If you are expecting respect that hasn't been earned, and if you're comparing her to someone else, saying you need to be more like that, if anybody out there is comparing your submissive to Dawn, stop it. She's not Dawn. Dawn is only the submissive she is because I've had to grow so much to be able to hold her so completely and so with so much care that she has been able to come out of her shell to the point that the fantasy of what I imagined her submission could look like is only a small shred of how fucking incredible it is. But it had to start with it feeling like it didn't live up at all. But the moment I start judging her and comparing her and like, why can't you be more like that? I'm just showing her that I'm not strong enough to lead her there. I'm expecting her to lead herself to a place where her submission looks the way that I want it to. That's not how it works, guys. You have to lead her to the place where she is the submissive that you want her to be. Which means you have to admit and accept her where she is, and then take one step at a time in the direction of bringing her into what you want to lead her into. So, if she's not the submissive you want, that's on you. She's the submissive that she is. She's the woman that she is. She's where she's at right now. And if she's willing to surrender to you, you have to meet her there and then take her forward into what it is that you want, whether that's sexual or relational or both. And for the person asking this question, should you let him find his own side submissive? Frankly, first I would speak up really loudly for how you feel in response to the way that he is treating you. And then next, if the way that he is treating you doesn't change, you should let him find another partner entirely, because he should leave you alone. And you should find somebody who can actually earn your respect and earn your submission rather than just expecting it. Next question says, my master never tells me he loves me to my face, only hinting at it in text messages. Can I ask him for this? I don't want to emasculate him. Women can't emasculate men. A man who feels emasculated is only feeling that way in response to what you do or what you say because he already lacks that belief in himself. He already is living a life where he has emasculated himself. And if you saying, I'd like you to say that you love me more, makes him feel emasculated, you didn't do that to him. He already felt like that. A man who actually respects himself won't be emasculated by you. And a man who's emasculated by the way that you act is blaming you for something that's actually an internal state. It's his own pain, it's his own fear, it's his own inner weakness or lack of connection to his inner power. Because a man who is in a functional relationship with his inner authority, with his inner dominance, nothing you say will change how he feels about himself. That man cannot be emasculated. And so a man who feels emasculated in response to you saying, I would like you to say that you love me more, that man was already emasculated. So what happens here with a lot of submissive women, a lot of feminine women, a lot of women who have read Alison Armstrong's books or followed some of these feminine embodiment teachers who tell women to never emasculate men, the problem that comes about is you get afraid of sharing your own actual experience. And you shut down your voice. And your voice is an essential part of your submission. You have to have a very loud voice in order to be submissive in a healthy way. Because, use this example, if you're with a man who you love, but who won't say that I love you to you, and that feels important to you, if you don't speak up for that, now how does he ever know that that's valuable or important to you? This is how we as the dominant calibrate our leadership to the experience that you are having of us. So it's not emasculating to share what you need. It's essential for your own self-respect and for our ability to attune to you, to lead you well, to know what it is that you need, because we're not mind readers. Next question says, submissives rely on their dominance to have it together and do the work. But where does the work begin for a submissive? This kind of comes back to the question I answered a little bit earlier about submissives and their work. The work begins with setting down all of the ways that you don't let your man in. This is where submission and feminine embodiment cross paths, and most people don't understand either one of them. The work begins with stopping trying to do the work. Because everything you think you need to do, the fixing energy, is actually keeping you from being able to feel your submission. Submission and feminine embodiment are the same thing. You receive first. You don't act first. You receive first. You have to. You have to notice what it is that's going on around you, how you feel about the way that your dominant is showing up in his life, the way that you feel about your work, the way that you feel about your finances, the way you feel about your sex life, the way you feel about your kinks. What's going on? Like, what's the truth of what's happening, and how do you feel? And then you express that feeling. So the work really begins in stopping the trying, stopping the fixing, and start, like Dawn has said this so many times, nothing started helping her until she slowed her life down. Working less, working out less, running around less, doing less, so that she could really tune into her inner experience. So that's where the work starts. Get in tune with what it feels like to be living the life that you're living. Start expressing that. Our next question here says, can you share how you both handled the time when Andrew made a mistake? You're assuming that I make mistakes. Of course I've made mistakes. I've made some big ones. I've made lots of small ones. And the key to handling when a dominant makes mistakes, the key to how we've handled when I make mistakes, is there's devotion. Right? So my mistakes are not used against me or used to threaten me. Now, Dawn doesn't let me off the hook. When I mess something up, because of this receptivity, right, receiving first, she feels really, really terrible when I do something that's hurtful to her. So she doesn't just take this and run away. She feels it, and then she lets me see how my action affected her, how it hurt her, how she felt in response to the way that I showed up. So that is how she handles me making mistakes. How I handle me making mistakes? Obviously, I try my best to learn from them so I don't make them again. But the first step is really when I see she's hurt. I did something, and the way that she's feeling in response to that is hurt. I have to really tune into that feeling that she's having, because the hurt that she's experiencing might be pain of her ego. It might be pain that's actually got nothing to do with what I did, or it might have everything to do with what I did. And so I have to be able to discern between those two. And if there is actually something, which again, there have been plenty, where I have done something that was out of integrity, that was hurtful to her, the first thing that I do is I sit with that and how it felt to feel her feeling that way. And I decide how I want to handle myself. I decide what it is that I'm going to change in my actions and my behaviors before I make any promises. I don't react with my words. I react with my actions. And so the way that I handle the mistakes that I make is I deal with myself. I look deeper at what caused me to make that decision. What was the motivating factor for that action that ended in this place where she's hurt? And I deal with that. I don't just try to force myself to stop doing something. I have to look underneath, like, why did I do that in the first place? I have to take ownership for that. I have to work on that. I have to deal with that and make myself better. So when Dawn lets me in to feel how she feels, and then I'm committed to being my best and to never defend myself. Here's a really important thing. If you are a dominant that's listening to this episode, never defend yourself. Never argue. Never explain yourself. If you want to know more about that, get into my Becoming a Dominant Man course. Get into my Unshakable free email series you can find in the show notes. But never defend yourself. There's no reason to. Next question here. I am coming into my feminine. It's a force within, and I can't stop it, nor do I want to. But the container of my marriage doesn't feel safe to express her fully. How do I develop a safe container for her? Well, first, the way that this question is worded, I don't think you understand what your feminine actually is. Because you don't develop your own container. That is your old pattern. That is the way that the masculine expresses itself, the masculine builds the container. You are what's held inside of the container. And the expression of your feminine is the expression of how you are feeling in response to your life. So your marriage doesn't feel safe for something, clearly. But the only way for your marriage or your life to feel safe for you to express how you feel is for you to express how you feel. And that will give an opportunity for the world to reorient itself around the truth of how you are receiving it. So the feminine doesn't rise, the feminine descends. The feminine descends into her own felt sense of what is going on in the world around her. And she expresses how she feels. So if your marriage doesn't feel safe, speak up. Keep speaking up. Don't stop speaking up. If it breaks the marriage, then that marriage needed to be broken. One of the unfortunate and challenging, but very true and frankly valuable realities here is that our world needs the feminine to speak up. There's a lot of pain. You're hurting, right? You're coming into your feminine and you feel like it's not safe for you to even share how you feel. But that can't stop you from sharing how you feel. You can't let fear of things changing stop you from coming into the truth of who you are. We get so afraid of losing love. We get so afraid of losing something. And you can't lose anything that's real. You can't lose what's true and what's right. So if something gets pushed away by you expressing the truth of how you feel, and I'm going to come a little bit deeper into this in another question here, because expressing the truth of how you feel doesn't mean pointing fingers or blaming. It's how you feel. Pointing fingers and blaming is trying to control the outcome. You don't have control over the outcome in a pure feminine expression. That's the opposite of feminine expression, is trying to control outcomes. Trying to direct. So you don't develop a safe container for her on your own. You develop a safe container by finding the places where you can express yourself freely and be met and accepted in that. You have to be your own container until someone is big enough to hold you. And when I say that, I mean you have to be brave and courageous enough to speak up regardless of the consequences. This next question kind of dovetails in with that nicely, where she says, my dominant tells me that he notices when I'm in my masculine, and I take it like criticism because he isn't masculine anyway. How do I submit in those moments? He has to be more masculine. So this is finger pointing, right? He's saying, you're in your masculine, and she's saying, you're not masculine anyway. You have to be more masculine before I can be. You will never get anywhere that feels good by pointing fingers at each other. You have to stop that. This is what I call sitting down on the same side of the table. If what you want in this question, how do I submit? You don't submit in those moments. There's nothing to submit to when somebody's pointing their finger at you and telling you you're doing it wrong. Guys, you cannot get her to submit by telling her she's submitting wrong. That's not how this works. Because you are already giving her control over your dominance by saying you aren't good enough. You have to be different so I can be different. You're telling her she has to change before you can take any kind of a leadership. Oh, you made her go first. But also, if you are trying to lead a woman and she is saying to you, you're not masculine enough, you need to be better, you have to go first, and she's you. As the woman, you have to express how you feel rather than tell him he needs to be different. Because if you're telling him he needs to be more masculine, you're taking the dominant role. So you're both at each other's throats here. And how can you ever have intimacy and closeness and depth and devotion and any kind of fulfilling relationship at all when you're just at each other's throats? So sit down together and say, we want this relationship to be the best it can be. You both have to take responsibility for yourselves. As the submissive asking this question, rather than saying he's not masculine enough, take a look at why it is that you feel the need to blame him. What's your own distrust of him or of men in general, of the masculine in general? Do you even like men? Do you even have the ability to trust men because of what maybe has happened to you in your life before this? So you have to do this together. The dominant isn't doing this to the submissive. The submissive isn't using the dominant to get her needs met. You're doing this together. This is a joint effort. And if it's not, you don't have a relationship, so just leave each other alone. The next question says, I don't know how to surrender fully outside the bedroom. What is being in my feminine really? Is it really just doing nothing and letting him do whatever he wants? So this is something that, in a black and white thinking, that comes up whenever I tell women that you have to be receptive first. Oh, so I just don't do anything? Or when I talk about being rather than doing. Oh, so I don't do any. You're doing the things that you do when you were living in submission, when you were living in a feminine expression, are driven from how you feel. They're driven from desire. Almost all women that I've ever met and worked with only act based on fear, obligation, and guilt. Because they should. Because they're afraid of what happens if they don't. Because they're trying to make sure that nothing bad happens. Because they're afraid of being judged. It's all fear, obligation, guilt. And you can't have any kind of a healthy relationship with yourself, first and foremost, when you aren't even connected to your own desire. Your actions just are not what leads the way. You don't act first, you act second. First, you feel. And then you act out of that feeling, out of pure desire. What do you actually want? Where do you actually want to give yourself? What do you actually want to do? If you disconnect the doing from fear, from obligation, from guilt, and you really look at what do I actually want to do and only do that, that'll take you much, much farther. So is it just letting him do whatever he wants? In a way, yeah. But that doesn't mean that you let him get away with doing whatever he wants. It means you don't try to control his actions. You just express how you feel in response to those actions. A good friend of ours told us about this thing one time where she was with a new partner. He wanted her to give him head. And she said, "No, I only do that when I feel inspired to." And it kind of like threw him for a loop. But think about that. Rather than doing it because he wants it, she only gives in that way when she feels inspired to give in that way. So now when she does give him head, she's giving him head because she wants to, because she's enjoying it, because she's connected to her own desire to give to him. She feels the desire to give to him, and then she acts. So that is how you deal with your doing from a submissive place. Because now everything that she gives is going to be imbued with the energy of wanting to, rather than I have to, or I'm afraid of what happens if I don't. Or like, I had my orgasm, but he hasn't had one and I need to give him. That's all obligation. Obligation never feels good. So you stop controlling him. You stop trying to tell him what to do. You certainly reflect how you feel about him. And if how you feel is desire, then you give. But if how you feel is hurt, then you express that pain. And that is back to the first part of this question where she asked, I don't know how to surrender fully outside of the bedroom. This is how you surrender fully in your life. This is how you get to live a life of surrender. This is how you get to start experiencing the freedom that submission can be, rather than the obligation that submission can be. Because submission can only be free when it is disconnected from the energy of obligation. If you want to live a life that feels surrendered outside of the bedroom, then you have to actually surrender. That's scary. But it's only through that vulnerability that you have an opportunity to really feel when your true desire is there. And then you move from that. That's where you move from desire, not from obligation. My next question here, what can I do to support my man? He says he wants to be my dom, but he still isn't leading me. I'm trying to be patient, but he doesn't know what he's doing. The only way for him to learn is for you to share how you're feeling in response to how he is showing up. Now, are you comparing him to a standard? Earlier there was the question about my husband compares me to an online submissive. Are you comparing him to anyone? None of you submissives listening to this, don't ever compare your dominant to me. Certainly don't compare him to fictional characters in your smutty romance books, to Christian Grey, to whoever your fantasy dom is. It's great to have fantasies. They're exciting. They're fun. But you're dealing with a real life human being here who's probably terrified about stepping forward into a dominant role. This is what submissives don't understand about us as men. We are just as terrified to take charge as you are to let go of control. And the fact that you're asking this question, what can I do to support my man? He doesn't know what he's doing. You're still in a controlling role here. You're still trying to get him to do it right. You're still trying to get him to do it your way. Maybe he's doing it right for him. Maybe he is working through some really intensely activating fear around the fear of loss of love, the fear of abandonment, the fear of rejection. Because when we're raised in this culture that raises mostly spineless nice guys, every part of our system as men believes that if we step into any form of power, that we are going to be judged, rejected, and eventually abandoned for it. Probably shamed along the way. That's what our programming is telling us. Even if we have a woman who's sitting there saying, no, boss me around, tell me what to do. I want to be your submissive. I want to do what you tell me to do. I want you to take control. His internal system is screaming at him, that's not safe. So if he wants to be your dom, which in your question here, you said he says he wants to be my dom, give him a chance to do it from the place that he's at. He has to do it at his pace. You're not submitting to a fantasy. You're submitting to a real life person with fears, with past pain, with trauma. Like, you've got to give him the patience and the compassion that he's going to need to step into his power. Keep expressing your desire. Keep expressing what you want. Keep expressing how you feel. Like, this doesn't mean you shut up, but it does mean that you have to give him the bandwidth to grow into this, because, again, his system is probably screaming, not safe. The best thing you can do to support him is believe in him, not try to get him to do it right. So I want to say this clearly. For the submissives, if you want your man to be more dominant, the best thing you can do is to believe in him. To tell him that you believe in him, that you believe in his power, that you think his desire is a good thing. Like, build up the part of him that is probably telling him inside of himself that he's going to be shamed, abandoned, and left if he expresses or steps into this power. Build him up in that rather than telling him he doesn't know what he's doing. You're not being the dom right. Like, all of that is just reaffirming in him the very thing that's causing him not to feel confident in this. Build him up. Tell him you believe in him. Next question is, how can I, as a submissive, get my needs met for sexual play, but also not give myself away or give my submission away? I know my worth, but I also have needs. It's a tough spot to be in for a woman. When you really, maybe you've given yourself away, or you don't want to give yourself to people who are not going to hold you, but you also have sexual desire. I would say the best thing that you can do is learn the capacity to hold more desire. Because if you're diffusing the energy of your desire, if you're diffusing the energy of your wanting by getting, right? Whether this is with casual sex or anything else, it's your magnetism that's dying. So learn to live in your longing. Learn to live in your craving. Learn to let the ache to be met grow, to hold more of that energy. Your need for sexual play is really a need to be seen and heard and held. And so when you start doing that for yourself and you see the ways that maybe you are throwing up walls or rejecting the very thing that you want and that you crave, rather than looking at this short-sightedly, look at it a little bit bigger picture. Because that desire, that need for sexual pleasure and engagement, is the energy that can be the magnet to magnetize the person that you want in your life. So learn to be with that and let that grow. The next question here says, feeling your emotions freely and unapologetically and being rude and disrespectful to your dom seems like a fine line to walk when it comes to fear, anger, or sadness. How do you manage this? So I have to step back for a second here. I've been talking about this quite a bit in this episode, right? You need to speak up. You need to share how you feel. That is how you Like, sharing how you feel is how you let someone know how you feel, like how you are receiving them. But nobody has a real hard time sharing how they feel when things are going well. I guess some people maybe have a hard time speaking up for gratitude or actually expressing admiration or affection. But in general, it's much easier to feel those feelings because you don't have shame around them. They don't activate a fear of rejection in you. But when it comes to things like anger or sadness, especially anger or sadness in response to the way that he's showing up or treating you, the reason those are hard to share is because they're activating something in you. There's some part of you that's afraid of his response to you speaking up. So the association that you're making in asking this question, saying that it feels like a fine line between expressing your emotions and being rude and disrespectful, is you're putting yourself in a role of being responsible for how your emotions are received. Right? The feeling of the emotion, you've already decided how you think it's going to be received, and you want to control that. Or you're afraid of that, so you don't express it. Or maybe you shape it, or you package it up and make it into a cute little, like, well, it kind of hurts a little bit when you... So the way that you do this is you have to disconnect from that control that you're trying to exert over the way that your feelings are being received. You have to stop trying to control the outcome and just feel how you feel. Also, finger pointing. It is never disrespectful to say, I'm sad. It's never disrespectful to say, I'm angry. If you don't want to come across as disrespectful, don't blame. Don't make your feelings into blame. Share how you feel, not what they did to make you feel that way. That's the big difference. And also, this isn't just about talking about it. This is actually feeling your feelings. Sometimes, if you're sad, what you really need to do is cry. If you're angry, what you maybe really need to do is scream. You need to tune into your body's sensation that it's having, not just explain it. Because if you are thinking about how you're feeling, if you're trying to process how you're feeling, you're still not feeling, you're still thinking. Feeling is an internal experience. And you don't need to explain your sadness. You don't need to justify it. Sometimes you just need to feel it. Just let yourself cry. And the reason that doesn't feel safe is because you are expecting something to be done to fix the reason that you were sad. So you need to talk about it. You need to explain it. You need to justify it. You need to make sure that the point is made. But that's where control comes in. If you stop doing so much of that and you start with just feeling it for yourself, you disconnect from that codependent pattern of trying to get them to change how they're being so that you feel differently. But you just feel how you feel. What that does is it lets your partner, it lets a man in his natural emotional sensitivity feel you. You've heard me say this before, that like women, you need us to feel what you're feeling, not understand what you're feeling. You need us to be able to connect to the felt sense emotion. And we can't do that if you are intellectualizing. In order for me to feel Dawn, she has to be feeling herself. Next question says, my husband is dominant but has trauma from childhood abuse and flips between being dominant and shutting down, which leaves me without anything to surrender to. What can we do to stop this cycle? I don't want to be thrust into the dom role. He has to be willing to do the work to heal that trauma, because he won't thrust you into the dom role when he isn't reacting to something deeper inside of him that's not happening right now. So your husband may have dominant tendencies, but a man isn't actually dominant when he is still being run by deeper patterns. We're still submissive to the experiences from our childhood that we still haven't taken ownership of. Most men just take those things and try to stuff them down and pretend like they're not affecting him. But they are. So, back to what's been a theme here in this episode, when you ask what can we do to stop this cycle, what you can do as the submissive partner, if your man is shutting down and pulling back and basically just leaving all of this empty space that you end up having to step forward to fill. Stop stepping forward to fill it. Let him feel the consequences of not having dealt with his shit. As soon as you step in and do it for him, then you've saved him from feeling the consequence in his life. And as long as you're saving him, you're never giving him a chance to really hit whatever version of rock bottom he needs to hit to convince him that it's time to actually deal with his pain. So share how it feels when he pulls back, and then don't step up and tell him, like, this hurts. There are a lot of things that aren't going to get done, but I'm not going to save you from it. Let him feel that. Next question here says, my partner's in a chapter of life that's incredibly taxing, working 70+ hour work weeks. He simply can't step into his role, and I feel unsettled. I struggle to know how much I should adjust expectations versus communicating my needs. Communicate your needs. I'm going to address this from the dominant side first, because if you are a man who is driven to be dominant, you're probably going to be driven in a lot of areas of your life. And that drive can get overemphasized in your work. It's very easy to over-index on how much time we're pouring into jobs and careers, and under-index on the value of our relationship to our overall life. So if you want to be in a dom-sub relationship, I'm sorry, but you can't be gone 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. It's not going to work. She needs you. So if what is most important to you is your work, then don't even try to get into a 24/7 dom-sub relationship, because you're not available for it. You've prioritized your work to the extent that there's no time for the relationship to be much of anything at all. So that's the first place. The second place is, if you are in a period of time where you are going to need to over-index on work for a certain purpose, then you have to take ownership of the fact that I'm going to need to scale back what I can give in this relationship. So maybe the rules get narrowed. Maybe the rituals get honed down to a few very meaningful ones. But you have also a commitment to when this is going to be over. You need to give her clarity on what to expect, on what you are where you are going to be giving your time, when she's going to have you back. And also, doing this might make it possible for her to then feel safe enough to then be able to have her step forward under your guidance, under your leadership, and assist you in this period of time. So as the dominant, you have to lead through these periods and these seasons of uncertainty. Unfortunately, what a lot of men do, what a lot of us do, I've been guilty of this in the past. This is one back to quite a bit earlier in this episode, talking about my mistakes. One of the mistakes that I've made in the past was this one here, where I got busy, tied up, wrapped up in other parts of life, and I wasn't as available to Dawn, and I didn't adjust my expectations of her or of myself. And so I either ended up getting burned out completely, or she got frustrated. So clarity is essential here. Be very clear. If you don't do that, you're going to leave her basically spinning, because we have to remember, guys, she relies on us. She counts on us. When she's letting go of control and surrendering to us, if we just poof off and we're like, I'm going to go work 12-hour days, 6 days a week, and then be exhausted and burned out on the 7th day for a while, and we don't give her anything, we're just leaving her hanging. She's counting on you. She's fucking counting on you. So find a way to give her some clarity, give her some expectations, and maybe consider what actually matters to you. Now, if you're the woman in this position, the one asking this question, or if you are in a position like this, if you're not getting clear expectations, then you never stop expressing or communicating your needs. He may not have as much available to you in this season of life, but that doesn't mean that you just ignore the fact that it's happening and hope that it goes away. You deal with it. You have to address it. And the last question here today is, how do you know when it's time to walk away from your dominant? And that question hurts to read, because you know how much pain there is to get to a point where you're asking that question. The clear answer is, if you're asking that question, it's probably already been time for a while. But to take it one step deeper, if you've spoken up, if you've shared how you feel, if you have done your best to express your experience of this relationship, and actions haven't matched words, then you're just punishing yourself by sticking around, hoping that things change. So when it's time to leave is when you've shared and expressed everything that you can, and it hasn't made a difference. Then staying is only punishing yourself and that person. Like, you're protecting everyone from feeling the pain of promises not met and desires not fulfilled. But the chances are, if you're asking a question, how do I know when it's time to walk away from a dominant? It's already time. So thank you everyone for tuning in. I appreciate this. If you enjoyed this episode, please comment on YouTube. You can comment on Spotify. Leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. And if you have other questions you'd like to hear me answer in a future episode, the next Q&A I do is going to be answering dominance questions. So if you are a dom listening to this and you have questions, maybe some of these brought up some stuff for you, send them to me. You can reach me on Instagram at _infinite devotion. You can get on my email list and you can send an email. Get your questions to me. My next Q&A episode that I do in a few weeks will be one answering the dominance questions. So thanks for tuning in. Appreciate you all, and we will talk to you next time.